Tired of big tech clashing with your Catholic values? Fide Chat is now live on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. It's private, encrypted, and built by Catholics for Catholics, with features like parental controls and more. Connect securely with family, friends, and groups. Download Fide Chat at fide.email. Technology without compromise.
Well, it's out. The new Vatican document on titles for the Blessed Virgin Mary and her role in salvation has been released. And when it was announced about a little over a week ago, we saw a weird reaction from people. You could tell people had not been paying attention or still, for some reason, believed that Pope Leo was anything but Pope Francis II. And here, the reaction, well, a lot of people are going to be very heartbroken today. When it was announced, people assumed we were finally going to get a definition of the title of the Blessed Virgin Mary as co-redemptrix. Now, for those who object to that title, they object for the same reason that, as of this morning, the Vatican objects to it. Because people think co means equal. It does not. It means participated in. That's all it really means. Educate yourself on the subject by looking at the devotion of Our Lady of Sorrows, and you will see how she participated as co-redemptrix in the suffering of Christ. She's not only not equal in the redemption of man to our blessed Lord, her participation was small but key, very key, not merely in saying yes through her fiat, but also to uniting her sufferings to our Lord on the cross. But I want to show you just exactly how this goes, because it's not just co-redemptrix that's suddenly curbed. This Deacon Nick Donnelly posted this on X last night because it turned out the actual document leaked last night. Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez has released a document titled Mater Populi Fidelis, which totally rejects the use of co-redemptrix for Mary, stating that is always inappropriate. A cardinal has written immodestly about male and female sexual arousal and has attempted to force clergy to bless those engaging in the sin that James Martin has an interest in, one of the sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance, has totally disqualified himself from instructing the church about the Immaculate Virgin Mary. His judgment on the question of Marian titles cannot be trusted compared to that of Pope Pius XI and Pope St. John Paul II, who both referred to Mary as co-redemptrix. The Blessed Virgin Mary, co-redemptrix and mediatrix of all graces, ora pro nobis. That ending there with that prayer is now prohibited. Co-redemptrix and mediatrix of all graces, prohibited in the new document. Take some time to wrap your head around this. It's prohibited now. Vatican News, about a minute before I went live, has the article. The document of the Dicastery of Doctrine of the Faith approved by Pope Leo XIV offers clarifications on titles applied to the Blessed Virgin Mary and calls for special attention to the use of the expression mediatrix of all graces. Now, the reason they reject co-redemptrix isn't because they explicitly reject the idea that she united her suffering at the foot of the cross, and through her fiat was key, but still, in a small way, important in the salvation story. I say small only in comparison to the act of our Lord through his passion, death, and resurrection. Gigantic compared to our participation in all of this, but in comparison to the Son of God, completely very small. It's hard to describe this in a way that doesn't sound like we're trying to insult Our Lady here. But they object because it sounds like it could be misconstrued as being equal to Christ. And it's typically misconstrued first and foremost by Protestants who don't think Our Lady participated in anything. Many of them, not all, but many, insult Our Lady by calling her just a vessel, a tool used by God. Very gross stuff that they say about her. I don't need to go into further detail. Most of you already know. Michael Haynes, a Vatican press pool accredited journalist, was the first to post about any of the contents of it once it was released. Vatican writes that it would not be appropriate to use the title co-redemptrix to define Mary's cooperation. Reason given, quote, this title risks obscuring Christ's unique salvific meditation or mediation and can therefore create confusion and an imbalance in the harmony of the truths of the Christian faith. They're doing this because of ecumenical dialogue. That's why. Because if people had a hard time, Catholics had a hard time with the title co-redemptrix because of confusion, catechesis would solve that. Cardinal Fernandez would be perfectly within his right and duty as prefect for the dicastery of the doctrine of the faith to issue guidelines and orders teaching by priests on Sundays at the next Marian feast day, which is not that far from now, honestly, or just in general, to teach what co-redemptrix means. But instead, they are suppressing it. And not explicitly because they think it's wrong, which is the most maddening part of this, but because it's confusing. Co-redemptrix theology has been taught for centuries, according to Michael Haynes, and in 1913, the Vatican gave an indulgence to a prayer which ended, I bless thy holy name. I bless thine exalted privilege of being truly Mother of God, ever virgin, conceived without stain of sin, co-redemptrix of the human race. In other words, popes for the last 6 or 7 centuries, as I was reading on this before going live, were wrong to do this because it risks confusing people. If that sounds like a little bit like they're more worried about the esteem of the world than they are the truth, you would be correct. That is where we are now. This is a good summary of what was in the leaked document. 1, it simplifies the process for handling Marian apparitions and other alleged supernatural phenomenon, further simplifying. They did this already, but they're doubling down. One of the things that they did, by the way, in the document, was give the nihil obstat to Medjugorje. That's the highest level of approval the Vatican now does. They don't say worthy of belief anymore. They don't say, yes, it's supernatural in origin, leaving that to a pope to decide for himself. But they basically said they have no objection to Medjugorje, which for some of you, you will think that's good news. I am not a fan of Medjugorje because I know too much about the dark side of Medjugorje. And so that's to me not good news. But number 2, this regulates Marian titles and attributes. Here are the approved titles: safe for liturgy and catechesis, Mother of God, which, by the way, if you're worried about confusing people, this title, number 1, I'm shocked they didn't ban. Because Mother of God is probably after co-redemptrix, the number 1 thing we have hurled at us as Catholics from Protestants and non-Catholic Christians who claim they're not Protestant, but actually are, like the non-denominational types. This is the number 1, maybe number 2. And then the Immaculate Conception is approved, Assumption, Queen of Heaven, and Mediatrix in the sense of intercession, right? You pray to the Blessed Virgin Mary for graces. That means that she's taking your request to her Son, right? Old-fashioned stuff, not things that most Catholics have a problem with. But here are the discouraged ones: co-redemptrix, because it risks implying equality with Christ, meaning this is a catechesis issue. They could fix this if they cared. 2, mediatrix of all graces, not to be used in official texts, too absolute, lacks magisterial consensus. Oh, really? Okay. For these, any shrine in the world that has these, according to the document, has until next May to remove them. This includes Medjugorje and other places, any Marian shrine that uses these titles. Number 3, banned is advocate of the people of God, only allowed in limited contexts. And 4, any new title requires DDF approval before diocesan or national use. There were a few other ones, not really worth mentioning in any great detail. One of them was something like essentially giving her a title of priest. Obviously, that should have been banned a long time ago, and common sense dictates it would be. Now, I want to go over a good summary of this because these documents are always super wordy. So we go to Mr. Chris Jackson, who is, if you've been thinking about going on a Substack, his is one of the first you should follow. Follow me, follow him, follow Stephen Cox, and then follow the others that you like. If you're wanting reporting on truthfully what's happening in the church, these are the guys you should be following. He said, Leo's humiliation of Our Lady. The Vatican erases the Mother of God for redemption, calling her title inappropriate, as bishops mock tradition and preach politics. Let's go down here. See, according to the leaked text published by Mesa and Latino, they published it, and they have very good sources. They got Traditionis Custodes days ahead of time. Celere Non Possum, which is not an anti-Pope Leo website by any stretch, also reported on the leak last night. The document declares, first in Italian, then in English, quote, given the need to explain the subordinate role of Mary to Christ in the work of redemption, it is always inappropriate to use the title co-redemptrix. This title risks obscuring the unique salvific mediation of Christ. When an expression requires numerous and continual explanations to prevent it from deviating from its correct meaning, it does not serve the people of God and becomes inappropriate. Mr. Jackson says that is not theological clarity, but bureaucratic mutilation. Rome has grown embarrassed of the woman who stood beneath the cross. The same church that canonized the architects of Vatican II now forbids the faithful to speak as St. Pius X once prayed, Our Mary, our co-redemptrix, obtain for us the grace of redemption. We know that John Paul II invoked this title several times himself. For those of you who are huge fans of JP2, he endorsed the title. He just never defined it. Now we can go here to Celere Non Possum. They've got the doc. They were the first to report on the document. They did so last night. They say that it's the document called Mater Populi Fidelis is the fruit of over 30 years of study and internal discussion within the dicasteries. 30 years of study. This is a document, again, started under Francis. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do they keep publishing these things if started by Francis? I'll have Father Dave Nix explain that to you in a moment here. But first, also the other website that I mentioned that has a strong track record of getting these documents right, which is, of course, Mesa and Latino. Again, this is the website that got Traditionis Custodes days ahead of time. Note of the title of co-redemptrix for Our Lady. The co-redemptrix in the time of John Paul II. This is how they handled it. We humbly ask ourselves why John Paul II used the title of co-redemptrix 7 times and Pius X indulged a prayer, meaning gave an indulgence for a prayer that ended with the words, I bless your holy name. I praise your sublime privilege of being truly Mother of God, ever virgin, conceived without stain of sin, co-redeemer of the human race. And it goes on like this. Here's some history on this. For those of you who think, I saw people claiming this was a 20th century thing, and then conceding, well, Leo XIII said something, so late 19th century. Here's the history of the co-redemptrix title. It's actually older than this. The title predates the Council of Trent. It predates Protestant Reformation. Okay? The title of co-redemptrix appears in the 15th century as a correction of the invocation of redemptrix, abbreviation of Mother of the Redeemer, that Mary had been receiving since the 10th century. This is what's called a development of doctrine in the classic, actually Catholic sense of a development of doctrine. St. Bernard assigns Mary a role at the foot of the cross, which gives rise to the title of co-redemptrix, a title which we find for the first time in an anonymous hymn of the 15th century in Salzburg. Although the title redemptrix had been preserved throughout the 16th and 17th century, it disappeared completely in the 18th century to be replaced by co-redemptrix. Theological investigation into Mary's cooperation in the redemption during the first half of the 20th century led to a deeper understanding of the title co-redemptrix. Some pontiffs, this is directly out of the document, some pontiffs have used this title without pausing to explain it. So, in other words, they're banning the title because popes used it without explaining it. Why? Generally, they have presented it in 2 distinct ways. In relation to the divine motherhood, since Mary as mother made possible the redemption accomplished by Christ. And 2, in reference to her union with Christ beside the redeeming cross. Goes on to talk about how Vatican II did not invoke her title in that way for ecumenical reasons as well as pastoral reasons. But this is essentially, they're banning it because of ecumenical issues. That's why. Because no one explained it, so we're banning it explanation doesn't hold water. They could explain it. Cardinal Fernandez has the chops to explain what the popes meant when they said it. But do you trust him to do so? Now, I don't. Let's go here to Father Dave Nix. He says, as people are getting ready for the new document on the Mother of God coming from the Vatican tomorrow, now this morning, let me remind you of 5 things. 1. Leo constantly praises Francis. That is true. He does. 2. Francis, while alive, insisted that Mary, holding the body of Jesus, wanted to look back in time and call the angel Gabriel at the Annunciation a liar. He said that. He did. He actually provides the proof for it in another tweet in the chain here. But yes, in the image of the Pieta, that image, Our Lady holding our Lord's body at the foot of the cross, Francis said that she wanted to go back in time and call the angel Gabriel a liar. Unbelievable stuff. Francis also said, while speaking of Mary, that, quote, no one is born a saint, effectively making himself a heretic for the 1000th time and denying the infallible dogma of the Immaculate Conception. And then he provides links to it. Vatican's own website with Bergoglio calling the angel Gabriel a liar, link to it there in English, and the Vatican's own website with him saying of Mary that no one is born a saint, providing the receipts from sources that cannot be refuted because they are the Vatican's own. This is unbelievable stuff. Truly, truly unbelievable stuff here. And I wanted to show you next why this part of the reason this document is wrong. An attachment or an assignment of an indulgence to a particular act is itself not an act of infallibility. But that indulgences exist are an act of infallibility, and the individual ones stand in the shadow of infallibility, because a pope is making a claim when they issue an indulgence that you, by performing a pious act, the pious act in question, will reduce your time in purgatory, the time for the punishment and expiation of specific attachments to sins, right? That is itself not an act of infallibility, but is attached to acts of infallibility, which is why it's so absolutely bizarre to see things like this. And when I posted over this, I posted on this saying, I guess the popes over the many centuries that used this title were wrong, and only Cardinal Heal Me With Your Mouth is right, in response to John Henry Weston posting about this yesterday. And this viewer of this channel posted this in response, a clip from the Raccolta, a Catholic prayer book, Mary as Co-Redemptrix, issued by Pope Benedict XV in 1913, published in 1914. In the decree of the Holy Office, Sunt Quois Amor, he, Benedict XV, praises the custom of adding the name of Jesus, the name of his mother, our co-redemptor, to the Blessed Mary. Also the prayer enriched by the Holy Office with an indulgence, in which the Blessed Virgin Mary is called co-redemptress of the human race. Excerpt taken actually from the sources of Catholic dogma, not the Raccolta. That's a different post I'll show you in a moment. So I guess Benedict XV was wrong, because it's inappropriate always to do it, because it could cause confusion. What could be better understood, really, is that we live in an illiterate age. People think the word co means equal. Your co-pilot on an airplane is not equal to the pilot. Okay? In that same way, that if your child helps you cook a meal, if you have a 4-year-old who wants to help you cook a meal, so you let them hold the spatula and hand you the spatula and things, that does not mean they were equal in cooking the meal. If someone is lying, do more work to figure out who. This is in response to somebody who is arguing in a post here about this, about why the Vatican was right to suppress this, and why, like, every pope for 6 centuries or something was wrong. This is the Raccolta, and this is a prayer that invokes her specifically as co-redemptrix, and then has that indulgence that I referenced earlier, printed from the 1957 edition of the Raccolta, but again invoking that 1914 prayer. This is really remarkable. For people who like more recent uses of this, we go here to no, not that one. I got a lot of posts here to show you, just because this is such a remarkable. I keep using the word remarkable because I can't come up with a better word. Mary's role as co-redemptrix did not cease with the glorification of her son, quoting Pope St. John Paul II in a 1985 address in Ecuador. So John Paul II believed in it. Modernist Rome apparently does not. But there's also another reason, and it's the unspoken reason, and I'm glad somebody responded to me specifically with this, which is that, oh, again, that one. There is another reason for this, and that is, I saw posted this, Catholic Conclave, a website I use frequently. They posted this on X. Oh, no, they didn't. But someone else, losing all my links here. Point being, as someone posted on X, I'll have the link to my show notes after this broadcast, that we are in the age of the laity. We are in the new synodal church. And it is the laity's job to make a better world. Redemption, according to the synodal church, is making a better world. That is what they think the gospel is. You get that by reading Pope Francis and Pope Leo's homilies and their agents, the senior members of the Roman Curia, when they're giving addresses. They always frame the gospel as making a better world. In that, it's a works-based salvation, false gospel. And in that, part of that is your duty is to participate in the redemption of mankind. You are a co-redemptor yourself by helping to work to make a better world. That is what this is about. So today, I started this not to dunk on anybody, but there are people today who are going to be heartbroken. It's 4:30 in the morning in the United States as I'm broadcasting this. Many of them Americans who 4, 5, 6 days ago, when this news broke, that they were going to issue a document, were fully expecting Cardinal Fernandez to issue a document formally defining the Mary as co-redemptrix, because it has been for centuries called the Fifth Marian dogma. It was one of those things that shocked people about Vatican II, that they did not address this. They said they wouldn't address it because of ecumenical concerns, meaning Protestants. I have had for the longest time a hard time understanding why it is the Catholic Church, why it is Catholicism and its leaders are the only religion on the planet that cares at all about what people who are not members of that faith think about how we should worship. Why do we care? Can you imagine a pious member, particularly hard practicing member of the Crescent Moon religion, with their false warlord prophet? Can you imagine them suddenly going, I wonder how those Catholics think we could be better at our religion, and then taking our advice seriously? Can you imagine that? Of course you can't. It's ridiculous. Can you imagine someone who practiced like Taoism care what we thought about how they should practice the religion more fruitfully? No, it's ridiculous. So why do we care about what others think? We do not sacrifice the truth because it's complicated. That's the issue here. It's complicated, so we can't have it. If it's complicated, Mr. Prefect for the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, it is your job to teach it, and to teach it correctly, as the chief agent for theology for the Pope. And so this gets suppressed, as well as mediatrix of all graces, even for private devotion. And so when I started here with Deacon Nick Donnelly, he posted variations of this on X yesterday and on Facebook, but he invoked a prayer that invoked Our Lady's titles of co-redemptrix and mediatrix of all graces, knowing full well what they were going to issue today. Titles that go back centuries. St. Bernard calling her co-redemptrix as a sort of a doctrinal development that corrected the redemptrix title or clarified it. This goes back a long time in church history. But that doesn't matter to modernist Rome. The apostates running the church right now, the institution, never saw an old devotion or an old theological statement that they didn't care for much, that they weren't willing to change. Go back and look at what they've said about the church after Vatican II. that its ecclesiology changed. The ecclesiology of the church is the theology of what the church is, its relationship to God, its relationship to man and the world, and what its mission is in the world. They said it changed. That's why they abolished the traditional Mass, or at least tried to. That's why they're trying to again. That's why they keep tweaking things, saying they don't reject this or that, but change the practice. This is another example here of the practice changing, most recently with Fiducia Supplicans. If you'll remember that document, it opened with a perfect reiteration of the church's teaching on that sin that James Martin has an unhealthy interest in for a priest. And then went on to say the pastoral practice will be quite literally the opposite of what the church teaches. And you saw it here. They didn't reject the title of Our Lady as co-redemptrix on theological grounds. They rejected it because it's complicated and it risks alienating people whose opinions about our religion shouldn't matter in the slightest. For those who convert, they have to wrestle with things that make them uncomfortable. Every convert from Protestantism will tell you this. Every convert from atheism will tell you this. Everyone has their own story, that there is some teaching of the church they had to wrestle with. And they ultimately, even if they didn't understand it at the time, decided they were going to submit to the wisdom of the church. And now they don't do that anymore. We're not in that business anymore. So yes, the document's out. It's as bad as most of us who are paying attention thought. Don't point your finger in the face of people today who were a week ago saying, oh, I can't wait for this to happen, this document to be released because it'll define co-redemptrix, finally give a formal teaching. Don't do that. It's a process people are going through to wake up. It's unfortunate that this is where we are. I'm like curious what you think about this, so let me know. And Father Dave Mariango in the chat says, always like it when a priest chimes in, St. Bernard explained mediatrix of all grace by comparing Our Lady to the neck of the church. We are the body, Christ is the head. All graces flow from the head to the body through the neck. 100%. That is a great analogy. So great of an analogy, I wish I thought of it. Thank you, Father. It is appreciated for that clarity. Sal Brown with the $20 super chat. I do appreciate it. Okay, so if Eve cooperated in the need for salvation, then Mary cooperated in her salvation to reverse what Eve did. I think that what Mary is called is the new Eve. Do these guys even read the Bible? Do they read the Bible? They read their preferred translations. Go back to that new version of there's a new approved Bible translation issued by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and it's a heretical mess. Look, the NAB Bible, I got, but long before I really got radicalized into this, I got from conservative theologians who were teaching at Catholic universities. I had learned from them that they were quietly writing to their bishop, begging them to ban the NAB because it contained heresies. Long before people picked up on this. That's a heretical translation. But the NAB makes this new translation of the Bible issued by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops seem very orthodox by comparison, because it erases the sins of James Martin types from it completely and turns it into generic sins of the flesh and sins against hospitality. Remarkable stuff. So do they read their Bible? Not a good one. Now, Deus Vault says, honestly, I wouldn't want this title being defined by the current leadership, but I am offended by the language used in the note. I 100% agree with that as well. I would rather Fernandez not have talked about this at all, and that today I'd be live streaming about what I was planning to initially before the document leaked. He has no authority, no real authority to teach on this. That sounds like I'm contradicting myself when I was challenging him to actually define it and teach appropriately. But he surrendered his authority 30 years ago when he wrote his Heal Me With Your Mouth book. And by his own admission, other writings that people have not found yet that were worse than what was in that thing. Someone who is unrepentant in their impurity should not be teaching about the Virgin Mary. I'm not talking about repentant sinners, unrepentant sinners. I'm not saying Cardinal Fernandez engaged in those sins, but he sure did write some weird poetry aimed at young people. Impurity used for the corruption of young minds. And that's the man doing this. today. Utterly amazing. Utterly amazing. Benedict Cardia says, will the rosary be forbidden? Not anytime soon. Eventually, sure, when the man of sin arrives, but who knows when that will be. Petra says, basically, we're dumb. That's insulting. Basically, it's too complicated for the little old laity to understand. Again, Cardinal Fernandez is perfectly within his the authority conferred upon him through the office by the Pope to teach these complicated issues in a way that is easy to understand. And he is a capable enough writer to do it. But instead, they care about the esteem of the world. And they care about what non-Catholics think about Catholic belief and practices. So I'm curious what you think about this. I will probably talk to you about this, in the reaction to this in the coming days. Father David Mary Engo does follow up with this. He says, because she is the Immaculate Conception, she can be the co-redemptrix. Yes. It's a complicated teaching, sure. But we Catholic peoples are not dumb. Even those who are from previous ages, who were not literate, meaning they could not read something you handed to them, many of them still understood what happened at their masses, which were more complicated than ours, better than many Catholics today understand what's going on in our more simple masses today. They understood the faith more readily than many of us today do. We have some very serious issues in the church, and one of them is a teaching issue. But of course, when we're talking about modernists who are running the church, those teaching issues are by design, not by accident. They are teaching a new religion. They have said as much. They have said as much. When they changed the ecclesiology of the church that radically, that the liturgy of that developed organically from at least the 4th century, if not earlier, through the 1960s was no longer appropriate for the church after Vatican II because of the changes in the liturgy, or the changes of the ecclesiology. And remember, the liturgy is just the expression of the faith and its worship. If they change it so fundamentally that it was no longer compatible, to use their word for it, that means they changed the religion. And they admit as much. Covered for you a story yesterday or the day before about a bishop who said it's time to get rid of ideas like true religion, false religion. The only thing they consider a false religion is the Catholic religion. The actual Catholic religion is identifiable a century ago. That's what they believe. They've said as much repeatedly. I'm curious again what you think about this. So let me know in the comments. Please pray for all of these people, and especially for those people who maybe disagree with us about how bad things are in the church. And we're really expecting Cardinal Fernandez to issue a formal teaching document that formally defined the co-redemptrix in dogmatic terms. And I knew they were in error only because of one thing. Such a document would be written probably by the prefect for the dicastery of the doctrine of the faith, but would be issued as like a papal encyclical or something else directly in the Pope's name. And that was not this document. Pray for them and make sure in so doing that we don't become prideful, arrogant peoples ourselves. Do not lose your soul in this resistance. Take these moments of anger and disappointment and turn them into moments of prayer. And please pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.